Okay, so we'll get started going through this. Now, I will move pretty quickly because there are a lot of different apps in here, but I want to make a couple of, share a couple of thoughts before we get started. So, there's about 40 or 50 different apps that we're going to go through. And it's not meant, these apps are not meant for you to use all of them. These are just different apps that are available that can help you with your productivity, that can help you with your processes and make things easier for you. My goal with this presentation is that there are a few apps that you can walk away with and say, those would work beautifully for me, and you implement those for you, and therefore making this presentation worthwhile for you to attend. The second thing is that, I want to give you some background on these apps, and that is that a lot of these I use myself, not all of them. When I say use myself, I will use these with clients that I work with. I'll help them implement them. I will suggest that they use it to help with their organizational processes, or I use them in my own business. And if it doesn't fit in one of those two categories, the third category will be is that they've come highly recommended to me. I've reviewed and looked at other reviews of the app or software and have included it for that reason. This by no means is a comprehensive list of all of the productivity and processes out there. These are just some apps that I think would be beneficial to any small business. I tried to make them as the app list as general as possible. So regardless of what line of business, whether it's online, offline, retail, whatever type of business you're in, these should be beneficial for you in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so a bit of my background. Before I started Charity Studio, I spent 10 years working at Friendship Circle of Michigan. Actually came on board as a family coordinator, and while that was a good bulk of what I did, I sort of took over, as the years went by, a lot more of the marketing processes, a lot of the online fundraising campaigns, as well as special projects, which generally included different types of campaigns that we ran, online, offline, and so on. Is my video not showing here? One second. There we go. Sorry about that. So the goal, at Friendship Circle, we did a lot of online fundraising campaigns, but also a lot of different technology implementations, different ways that we use technology in the organization. And from there, I branched out and started Charity Studio. Currently, in the past year, we've worked with about 50 or 60 different organizations in the areas of marketing campaigns, online fundraising campaigns, long-term strategic development plans, and so on. And in the past 12 to 18 months, we've helped organizations raise about $7 million in various types of campaigns. Okay, so with that, we'll get into the different apps and processes. We'll start with productivity. And before we start going into some of the productivity apps that are out there, I want to share with you a process that I found very beneficial for me, and that is something called objectives and key results. And objectives and key results is something that is gaining a lot of traction in the business world. Really the goal, the concept of objectives and key results is figuring out where you want to be in an X amount of time, and then figuring out how you're going to get there in a very organized, targeted, and methodical fashion that can be measured. A lot of times we have a path, we know where we want to go, we know what we need to do to get there, but it's either in our head or it's written down on paper or even in spreadsheets, but there's no measurable way to document if you've been successful in reaching your objectives or not. So we'll go through that quickly and then get into some productivity apps that can be beneficial for you. So the founder of Objectives and Key Results is somebody by the name of Andy Grove. He was the CEO of Intel for many years. He basically implemented this concept of objectives and key results at Intel. He took Intel at a time when it was uncertain towards its path. There was creating a lot of different products. And he streamlined the whole process at Intel and made it one of the most profitable companies in the 90s. There was somebody by the name of John Doerr that worked at Intel under Andy Grove. He took this concept of objectives and key results that he learned under Andy Grove, and he brought it with him to a venture capital firm called Kleiner Perkins, which he ended up being a partner at. And he took this concept and implemented it in many startups. And really the whole movement of objectives and key results can be traced back to John Doerr. He's sort of a champion of the whole process, and he's written a book which we'll talk about soon. So some of the companies that he's implemented it in, the most well-known one is Google. He implemented this process of objectives and key results in Google back when they were operating over a storefront on the second floor where there was just 20 or 25 employees. And he implemented this organizational concept of objectives and key results for Google. Since then, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of companies, big and small. It doesn't only have to work for big companies that have implemented this concept of objectives and key results. Okay, so just to get a little bit of an explanation of how objectives and key results work is you have your path, you have where you want to get to, and you have these key results. Key results are essentially measurable, and if you accomplish accomplish these measured results, then you should have fulfilled your objective. And we'll get into what that means. And here's an example. I'm going to give an example of somebody that is trying to sell crock pots online on Amazon, let's say. This is just an example, not disparaging anybody that sells anything on Amazon. Obviously, that's a very good business to be in. But somebody's selling crock pots on Amazon, and they have an objective. They want to be the #1 seller of crock pots on Amazon. So they have to do certain things in order to achieve that objective. And so that's where the key results come in. So the key results will be, and let's say it's the Kinnis Resource Fair, and there's a lot of shluchim in town, and they all use crock pots. And so he wants to also offer them the opportunity to maybe earn a little bit of revenue. So one of the key results that they'll do is they want to get 100 shluchim to leave 5-star reviews for their crock pots, and in return get something. So if they feel if they can get 100 shluchim to give 5-star reviews, that will elevate them in Amazon's rankings, and that will propel them into the forefront of a lot of people's, on Amazon, and therefore they'll be able to sell more crock pots. Another key result they may do is they say they may want to sell crock pots to 1,000 Lubavitchers over a month of time. That's a measurable result. They're saying is I want to sell 1,000 within a certain defined time frame. So they set up this list of these key results. And this is not a to-do list per se. It's just these are measurable numbers to say if I accomplish these measurable numbers, then I should be able to achieve my objective. So that's just a very basic example of how objectives and key results work together to be successful. Here's another way to show this, and that would be, let's say you have multiple objectives, right? So you want to, some of it may be financial objectives or profitable objectives. You want to be profitable by a certain amount of time. Maybe also it could be onboarding a certain amount of staff to enhance your team. But you can create a number of different objectives, and each objective will have a key result. Now, the key result, like I mentioned, are those measurable numbers. It's not your to-do list. To-do lists are not measurable. These are things you need to do to get done. So underneath a key result, in order to have that measurable number, you will have a to-do list that needs to get done in order to reach that measurable number. So here you could see how a flow works. And this can be done over the course of a quarter or a month or a year. Sometimes they'll bubble up. So you'll have objectives over a quarter, and then you'll have a yearly objective, annual objectives. And sometimes if you have a 5-year plan, you'll have a 5-year objective as well. And the goal of these are that they're not set in stone necessarily. You can refine them over time, but these give you targets to reach and a good tools to reach those targets. The 4 basic rules of objectives and key results. And again, this is a very, very basic overview. But you can set these annually and quarterly. You should not have too many. Once you have too many of these, you get overwhelmed and you don't end up doing any of them. They should be challenging. We'll get to that in a second, and they have to be measurable. These key results must be measurable. And when you get to key results, another element of it is that in order to, you have a score that you can assign to a key result. Did you do it 100% successfully, 75%? And you never want to set your goal that you're going to achieve 100%. You want to have some room where a stretch goal essentially, where you can, sort of go beyond what you thought was possible and achieve it and get 100% results. So most key results are considered that if you accomplish 70 or 75% of that, that is considered a successful accomplishment towards your objective. And that also gives you the room to have a stretch goal in place. And again, this is just a very basic overview. I strongly encourage you to read the book, Measure What Matters. This is written by John Doerr, and it gives you a really, really good understanding. There's a lot of storytelling, so it's a very easy read. It gives you good stories from big business, small business, how they implemented Measure What Matters. If you finish reading that book and you're into the whole concept, I strongly suggest reading another book. And this is a lot more, I guess you could say, dense and much more technical, but it really teaches you how to implement this. And it's called Objectives and Key Results, written by Paul Niven and Ben Lamorte. This is actually an expensive book for whatever reason. I guess they feel like they can make a lot of money off it, but they are coaches when it comes to objectives and key results. But this book will really help you implement it. And of course, if you go online, there's a famous YouTube video that's going around, the 3-hour video, I think, that explains objectives and key results. And then if you go to SlideShare, LinkedIn's product, there's a whole bunch of slideshows and presentations about objectives and key results that you could walk through. Okay, so let's go through some apps. These are productivity apps. Some of these are well-known, some of them are not so well-known. The most well-known productivity app in terms of task management, team collaboration, is Asana. It was founded by the co-founder of Facebook, and it's probably the most well-known and most well-developed tool. It gives you the ability to create different projects. You can have different teams that are working on different projects. If you're working if you're a solopreneur, you're just working by yourself, Asana still works very well. If you have a team of 10, 15 people, Asana works even better. And it's flexible and scales very nicely with an organization. It's pretty much the most well-known and pretty intuitive when it comes to setting up and organizing. As you use it more, there's more and more features you could use that really helps you organize yourself as well as your team. You could in theory use this for your OKR management as well. But this is another tool that I use, ClickUp. I find ClickUp to be the most beneficial for me in terms of running Charity Studio. I find it very, very flexible. It integrates amazingly well with a number of different apps, time tracking apps. I found ClickUp to be the most beneficial for me. It's a little bit more sophisticated than Asana in that there's a lot more options you have in terms of prioritizing. But I found it's more affordable than Asana and also does as good of a job as Asana. There's probably some more tools. It's a little bit more overwhelming, but if you really are disciplined and are looking for a very solid and heavy project management, team management tool, ClickUp gets a lot done. Some others out there that are pretty common. If you're into Kanban boards, Trello does a good job of that. Applying tasks and projects around that. A unique one that's out there that's gained a lot of traction in the last, that's a year or 2 years, is a tool called Monday. I wouldn't suggest this if you're a solopreneur, but if you have a large team and you have deadlines and you want to have good visuals, Monday is much more visual than some of the other tools out there, and enables you to customize project management and use it many different ways, but it can be pretty valuable. Smartsheet, if you're still into the whole, a spreadsheet look and feel, and you're much more familiar with that, Smartsheet is essentially spreadsheets on steroids. You can do a lot of automations, a lot of tasks, and so on. So it essentially gives you the same project management capabilities, but in the common, the more comfortable feel of what a spreadsheet looks like. It integrates with a lot of tools as well, and can be very beneficial for you. Okay, getting into some other productivities, and these are not productivity apps per se, but they help you with your productivity. I found HelloSign to be very, very easy and intuitive to use. There is a Google add-on. Simply go into if you're working on a Google Doc and you have a contract you need to draw up, you can just enter that into your Google Doc and then add the add-on, the HelloSign add-on. And within 3-4 minutes, you can send out a a contract for signature where you can sign, the client can sign, and so on. Very simple setup. I think you have 3 or 4 free signatures per month, and then after that, it's a relatively affordable tool to use. There's other companies out there, obviously DocuSign and a bunch of others out there. I found HelloSign to be the simplest to use. It may not be the most have the most features, but for me in a small business, I think that it's effective. All right, so heading into communications, and we'll discuss 2 types of communications here. There's internal communications, which really is how you communicate with your team, especially if you are working remotely. I have a team of 5 people that I work with. In addition to that, I have some freelancers. So not all of them are working. In fact, most of them do not work in my office. A few of them live around the area, but they prefer working from home, and that's fine. So how do I communicate with them? If I bring on a freelancer on a project, how am I communicating with them? So those are internal communications, and then there's obviously external communications, how you're communicating with your client, how you're dealing with sales calls and different things like that. So we'll go through that in communications. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. I will, if they are relevant to what we're talking about at that moment that I see them, I will for sure answer them. Otherwise, at the end, we could sort of have a free-ranging, open-ended conversation about different apps that I use that are not on this list, or apps that you suggest that are not on this list. I'd love to hear what other people think as well. Okay, so with that, I will continue on communications. Okay. First one, the most well-known internal communication tool, and you could actually use this with your clients depending on what type of business you're in, is Slack. I use Slack. It's probably the #1 way I communicate with my team. We don't have a lot of meetings. We don't have phone calls. We do not use WhatsApp. And just to go on a tangent here, WhatsApp is great for personal use and for potentially using WhatsApp Business for working with clients. But if you're in a small business team, to use WhatsApp to communicate, even in a group, is not ideal. To search for, first of all, their web interface is not robust at all. And to search for files and pass communications is very, very basic. Slack has a lot more tools. You can have, you can have different channels set up for different things. So I would suggest not using WhatsApp in a team environment within a business. I would suggest using Slack or something similar. Slack is very well known again, and there's a lot of different tools. Channels I found very, very beneficial. There's also direct messaging channels. So if you want to message people directly and so on, it's very well known. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Slack. Another interesting app out there is an app called Twist. Twist really goes after the people that are not satisfied with Slack and says Twist is the perfect alternative to email and to Slack. The challenge with Slack, and the reason why a lot of people will not like Slack is because it can be a disturbance. When people message on Slack, they sort of expect a response right away. And that's sort of the downside to Slack is this constant communication unless you're setting up certain criteria and expectations within your team about how fast people are supposed to answer Slack channels. What Twist does is it sort of removes that expectation, but it organizes things in a different and probably better way than email does. It still has the channel method where you have different projects within different channels. You can message people directly. But the way it's set up is it's meant to not have this instant messaging notification system. So by default, I think those types of notifications are turned off. And it's more like it's sort of meant to respond similar to you would with email. Maybe checking your email every 2 hours, every hour for a few minutes, as opposed to this constant expectation with Slack. So if you've tried Slack and it hasn't worked for you, I would suggest taking a look at Twist. Okay, so let's get into some external communications here. And this is talking, if you need to accept phone calls or you need to make a lot of phone calls out, you don't want to invest in a standard, telecommunications or phone system for your office, or maybe you're just all over the place and you don't have a standard office. You're working you're working some co-working places, you're working out of your house, and you have a mobile office essentially. So there are a lot of tools out there that essentially brings your phone office with you wherever you want. And that's also making, assuming you don't want your cell phone to be your business number. So DialPad is a very common one. It's a spin-off, I believe, off of employees that worked on something called Grand Central, which was Google's product to essentially their initial effort at learning voice recognition. So Grand Central set up as a voice automation tool. It spun off from them. They're ex-Google employees that now work with Google. DialPad works with Google Voice now. But essentially, it's your office. You're making phone calls. You could set it up as an office, and you can plug it into virtual phone systems like OB systems or Poly. Sorry, I forgot the name of the company, but Poly, whatever it's called, which are these virtual phone systems as well. So they're very beneficial. The other thing that can be very, very beneficial for is if you have a heavy sales, sales call. This makes it easy for sales calls, and won't get into the details on that. Another version of another competitor to DialPad is AirCall. I think these two are considered the top two products out there when it comes to mobile offices and making a lot of voice over IP phone calls and then using it with your cell phone as well. Okay, so this is a sales tool per se, FoneBurner. It's a tool that I found to be very effective in the nonprofit space for making a large amount of phone calls in a short amount of time. Essentially what FoneBurner is you can connect your phone number or any phone number you want and make 5 phone calls. If you have to make 20, 30 phone calls at a time for sales or for whatever follow-up necessary, FoneBurner is a great tool for making those sales calls. What it does is essentially it speeds up your phone call process by a factor of 5. You'll have the ability to to connect into their FoneBurner system, and then you make phone calls one after the other. You don't have to click anything. You don't have to look at lists to dial. You set up your call queue essentially, and then it dials out. There's a bunch of buttons. After every call, you can write notes and then assign what happens, and then go from there. There's so many features that I'm not going to have enough time to go into all of them. But if you do a lot of phone calling and you're sitting at a desk, and so you have a laptop or a desktop, I strongly suggest you take a look at FoneBurner. There's a lot of integrations with it as well. So if you leave a voicemail, which happens a lot with phone calls, you can automatically send an email to that person, say, hey, I just tried to reach out to you. And you can also send a text message to that person as well. So it's not just a system to make phone calls, but what happens is you can automate a process where based on what happens on a phone call, a person can also get an email with designated text scripts as well as a text message. OVERPASS is another system that helps with sales calls. I don't think it's as robust as FoneBurner. I think the benefit that they have is that they have agents that you can freelancers that will make these phone calls for you using OVERPASS. So if you want to outsource maybe your billing or some of your sales, OVERPASS has a network of freelancers that will make calls for you. Uber Conference is a really simple tool. It's actually owned by DialPad, but they act as two separate companies. I found Uber Conference to be very easy to use for basic phone conversations. You can set up a phone number without any pins, so it's easy to use. You can call in with a phone number simply, or you go through a computer, through the internet, and have a very easy to use conference call. You can share your screen. It's obviously not as robust as Zoom. It's not video conferencing, but if you have a lot of conference calls as opposed to Zoom meetings, Uber Conference is a very nice thing. You can also record the phone calls for later. So it's a very simple tool that's easy to use, especially for the people that are getting on the call. Okay, so this is a customer support tool. I've tried a number of different customer service tools, Zendesk, there's probably a Zoho's product. There's probably close to 100 different agent desks or customer support desks out there. They all do a very similar thing. I found Help Scout to be the simplest to set up and the one that looks least like a help desk. It looks a lot more like just a back and forth email, and it does it's the most intuitive one out there without a lot of the extra clunkiness that some of these tools have. So if you have a lot of customers and you need to set up a system for them to respond to, or you have clients and you have a technical support team or whatever it may be, if you need some type of customer support software, I found Help Scout to be the best one out there for a small business or nonprofit organization. Okay, Hustle is a very, very interesting tool. It's on the expensive side. It actually came about, I believe, during the campaign for Barack Obama's presidency. The Democratic campaign team for him basically created this tool, and it's essentially now a for-profit company. And what it essentially is it's a text messaging tool, but it's not a bulk text messaging tool. So there's essentially two types of text messaging tools. You could send out bulk text messages to a large list of people, and you will generally have those coming from a short code. Everybody can tell that it's just a bulk text message and it's not personalized to you. Hustle is the exact opposite. In fact, you cannot send 1,000 messages at once. You have to press send for every text message that you send out. Now, obviously that's a bit of a pain because you have to click send 500 times if you're trying to send out 500 messages. The benefit is that they're very, very customizable messages, and they can come from an actual phone number, not a short code. So it looks like a real person. Hustle is designed to send text messaging from a human voice. So if you look at the example on the screen, hey John, this is Amir with your favorite ticket venue. Can we interest you in the season tickets for this fall? So this looks like a very, very customized text message. The person on the other end doesn't know that very similar message went out to 500 other people within a very short time frame. And then you can manage and you can reply back and forth in an online system that makes it very easy to manage your communications with these people. So this guy answers, yeah, I've got row 3 up. How many are you thinking? So on. Sorry, he says, yeah, I'm interested. And so the sales agent responds. So if you are in the heavy sales, if you are heavily into sales or have a lot of interactions back and forth with a large number of clients, take a look at Hustle in terms of the ability for it to integrate with other tools, as well as the way it can segment information. So, if you have people on your list that went on vacation, then that you could say, hey, how was your vacation? I hope it was great, and then continue on with your message. Obviously, that's just an example, but there's many different use cases. You could put in there, hey, I noticed you bought something a week ago, or put the date in based on the last time they purchased something. So those are just different things you can do with Hustle. It's a bit on the expensive side, but if you have a lot of communications and you're finding that phone conversations are not cutting it and nobody's responding to your emails, you can take it to another level with Hustle. Okay, so let's get into some marketing tools, and I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because some of these are pretty well known. But here we go. MailChimp, I believe, is the most well-known and probably the most effective email marketing tool out there. It's way better than Constant Contact. If you're using Constant Contact, get rid of it. MailChimp is, I think, cheaper and better when it comes to automations, as well as a bunch of other things. Definitely suggest using MailChimp if you're using a standard email marketing tool. A bit of a different email marketing tool, if you have an e-commerce site or any other store that sells, I would suggest taking a look at Drip. Drip is another email marketing tool, but it's heavily focused on drip campaigns. And essentially what that is it takes information, certain activities that happen, and based on those triggers, it will send emails with information. So essentially it will monitor what activity is going on in your e-commerce site. As you see, it integrates with Shopify and other e-commerce sites, WooCommerce, and you can take that information and then set up a system in Drip where Drip will send emails based on certain things that customer does, or maybe he hasn't done. Maybe he hasn't bought something in a long time or hasn't come to the store in a while. So all of that can be tracked within a good e-commerce site, and then Drip can act on that and send out emails. This is a much more, I guess you could say, low-tech option, which is pretty cool, especially if you're just starting out and you're really on your own. And you want to send emails to clients, but you don't want them to get stuck in Gmail's different tabs, promotions tabs. Yet another mail merge lets you send up to 1,500 emails a day, which is essentially Gmail's limit. And this I'm making an assumption here that you're going to be using G Suite's tools, G Suite, to be sending out your emails. So you can do a very nice, easy, simple mail merge to your clients or to your customers using yet another mail merge. The beauty is that it goes straight into that person's inbox because essentially it's you that's sending it. It's the actual Gmail account that's sending it. It's not a third party that these email marketers essentially are sending on behalf of you. So Gmail recognizes it as a personal email. It goes right into their inbox. It looks a lot more personal because it's a text-only email. So if from time to time you need to send out text-only emails, this would be a great tool to use. I believe it does integrate with Salesforce, and obviously and essentially it works with Google Sheets, as that's where the source of the list of people are. Going to the next tool, this is obviously a social media management tool, Hootsuite. It's pretty well known. You can manage multiple channels, Instagram, Facebook, I believe Pinterest, LinkedIn, all of the standard social media tools can be managed with Hootsuite. The one that's the most common and most well-known for businesses that are actively marketing on social media channels is Sprout Social. It's a bit more expensive, but it does a really good job of managing your audience, giving you the ability to engage with your audience, and so on. I want to mention here that one thing to look at when you're looking at social media management, and it's not thought of that, I thought of it this way, but MailChimp is really moving into the social media management space as well, specifically for small businesses. So if you're looking for one place to do a lot of different things, send out emails, do some basic social media management, as well as do Facebook advertising. You can even send postcards through MailChimp now, and you want to keep everything in one place and very basic, I would take a look at MailChimp before you start looking at tools like Sprout Social and Hootsuite, just because it also integrates information and activity with your email. So it will know if you sent out an email, whereas Sprout Social won't really know that because it doesn't integrate with MailChimp in that way. But Sprout Social is the most well-known tool. Buffer is another great tool as well. They actually have 3 different products right now. One is the most well-known is a tool to schedule all of your messages. So if you don't want to be in front of your computer on social media the whole day, you can schedule 3 or 4 days worth of content or a week's worth of content, and have that go out automatically. They also just introduced a very good reporting tool to get a very good understanding of your people that are engaging with you, the people that are following you, and so on. And then the third tool is something that helps you respond to all of the direct messages that you get, whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn, or I believe on Twitter. It puts all of the direct messages that are coming through different messenger devices into one place, so you don't have to go to 3 different tools to manage that. And I found that very effective for some organizations that we worked with. Okay, data management. There's a ton of different data management tools. I'm just going to go to the ones that I use, and we'll go from there. So I use for my database, for my CRM, I use Untitled. I found it very intuitive, affordable. For a small business, I found it does exactly what I need. Salesforce, although is extremely powerful, it's too much for what I need. I don't need to manage all my clients in Salesforce. Untitled does exactly what I need. It pretty much has all the tools without being overwhelming. And it makes it easy to integrate with a bunch of other tools. I can pass projects on to Asana using integrations and automations and so on, and a whole bunch of other tools as well, and so on. So that's what I use for my CRM. I use Wufoo for form collection. I also will suggest using FormStack if you want a bit of more robust thing. But in terms of data capture, we could be here all day, but I'm just focused on those 3 for now. Very quickly, I'm gonna go through this. Automation is here in terms of business processes, nonprofit processes, even personal processes. Automation is a very, very powerful method and can be very beneficial for you. There's many values. There's a lot of value to automating different things. First of all, it eliminates a lot of human error. When we manually enter information or manually pass information from one system to the other, things get lost, there's mistakes made, things break. If automation is done correctly, you eliminate all of those issues. It also saves you money. You don't have a human being entering data. data can automatically be entered based on certain criteria and certain things being implemented. And there's just a number of other evaluations that happens immediately. So you set up a process and it happens immediately. You don't have to wait for somebody to do it. And again, there's many different ways that automation can be beneficial, and automation has many different meanings. And we're not going to go through all of the different ways to automate different processes, but think about anything that requires a lot of data entry, a lot of transferring from one place to another. Chances are there's something out there that can automate all of your processes, whether it's collecting information online and passing it into another system, whether it's taking stuff from your database and moving it to another system, whether it's sending out emails to people based on certain criteria. Automation is really the way of the future. Some of the examples that we already went through, drip is an automation process. And some of the, phone burner uses a lot of automation. So there's a lot of different automation tools out there already. You're probably already using some of them, but think about every process that you're doing. Just think and ask yourself, do I need to be doing this manually, or should I be automating this process because it happens again and again, and it could save me a lot of time and money. So those are some of the different basics. We'll skip through, I just pretty much in a nutshell discussed some of this, but we'll go to some of the tools. So Zapier is the most well-known tool for businesses and nonprofits and even individuals when it comes to automation. Zapier essentially connects thousands of different softwares and apps and tools and helps transfer data from one to the other, and also can do things for, from one to the other. For example, if somebody sends me an email with a certain subject line, I can say, okay, take that email, the text that's in the body of the email, and put it onto a spreadsheet for me to organize later. Or I could say put it into a database, or I could say put it onto the spreadsheet, and then from there split it out into 3 different categories somewhere else. So the possibilities are unlimited when it comes to using Zapier. And if anybody has questions about some of their processes and how Zapier can do it, I'd be happy to answer them at the end. So Zapier is a very, very effective tool. A similar tool out there is Automate.io. I found that some of the Zapier tools, some of the things that Zapier can't automate, Automate.io can. There's a number of other automation tools out there. One is called Integrate. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And then there's also something called PyDrive. There's probably about 10 or 15 tools out there, well-known tools out there. Some of them are very expensive. Some of them are very, very affordable. Zapier happens to be pretty affordable and the one that works with the most apps. Service Insight is a really cool tool, especially if you're using Salesforce, but it can work independently of Salesforce. It really helps with scheduling automatically. It can track email opens, and you can manage a whole bunch of different tools. It's a Gmail add-on, and it helps you manage a lot of your clients within Gmail without having to go to any other tool. So if you don't want to have a CRM, you could definitely look at something like Service Insight that lives within your Gmail and acts sort of as a mini database. Otter.ai, Otter essentially I found to be very, very, very powerful when I'm meeting with clients. So if I'm in a meeting, let's say a discovery meeting, and I'm spending the whole day with a client learning about what the process is or what they need help with. So instead of me writing notes and then focusing on what I'm writing and then trying to hear what the client's saying at the same time, I use Otter to record the whole meeting. It could be a 6-hour meeting. And what it will do is it will transcribe that meeting in real time. Now, depending on your tone of voice and the language that you're using, it will sometimes misunderstand the words, but it does about 85%. It successfully transcribes in real time about 85% of what you're saying in those meetings or what the other person's saying in those meetings. And it's enough to give you an understanding and a refresher of what was said, so you can pull that information and create really good discovery notes or whatever meeting notes you have from that. So I recommend whenever you need to record a meeting, I highly recommend Otter for that. There are tools online that you can use. You can send in a recording and they transcribe it for you. Human beings transcribe it for you. So if you need 100% match on your transcription, there are those tools as well. The name that I've used escapes me offhand, but if you want to put it in the chat box, I'll probably remember it, or I can get it to you a little bit later. Very quickly going through, Grammarly is a lifesaver for me. I hate spelling and dealing with grammar. So when I'm preparing a report or sending an important email, I use Grammarly all the time to make sure that what I'm saying makes sense. Every single time that I'm sending an email, I always find grammar or spelling issues that it helps me fix. It is probably the #1 most important tool to implement. I use it every single day, multiple times a day, and the basic version is free, so there's no harm. It's by far the best grammar, and it works with Gmail, it works with Google Docs now, it works with anything on your screen. Essentially, when you're typing, it will correct you as you're typing. Okay, very quickly going into hiring. If you need to hire people, hiring is a very, very challenging job, and it's draining, it takes a lot of time. So here are some tools that can help with hiring. JobScore is a very affordable and great tool for posting a job, and JobScore spits it out to all of the big job companies, Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, even Craigslist still. So it posts them all, and then you can have all of your jobs viewed in this JobScore system. You can tag people for further follow-up. You can remove people from the interest list. You can have multiple jobs at one time. You can even score. You can even have a system that will score candidates based on criteria. So if you're looking for people within a certain geographic radius, if you're looking for people with certain keywords in their job description, it will score them, so it makes it easier to filter through all of the job applications that you get. I found it very, very beneficial. Another tool that does something similar, I think, is a little bit more user-friendly in terms of the way it's designed, but it's a lot more expensive as well. But it does something very similar, and it helps you manage all of the people that are applying for a job that you're hiring. Predictive Index is a really, really cool tool to help you with the people that you're looking to hire. It helps you create a job description based on the type of job you're hiring for and the type of personality that you would need. So Predictive Index really gets into the personality of the person. So sometimes you'll hire a person and they have the perfect job skills for what you need, but their personality will not fit for the job. Maybe it won't work with the team that's already in place. Maybe they need somebody that's outgoing for that position and that person's more reserved. So the Predictive Index does a really good job not testing for skill, but testing for the personality to make sure that person will be a good fit for the position that you have. So that is a very, very important tool, and a lot of times it's overlooked. Now, this could be a little bit expensive for a small business, but if you've had frustrations with hiring and you feel like you're losing money in the whole hiring business and you want to give up, take a look at Predictive Index and see if that would be something that would work for you. These are some of the factors that you can measure for: dominance, extroversion, patience, formality. I'm not going to get into the whole science. It's a whole process, but you can look it up a little bit later. Upwork, if you're looking for freelancers, Upwork is probably the #1 place to find freelancers. Personally, I've found to be hit and miss. I found somebody that does great work with Google Ads on there. Found some other people that didn't do such a good job. Essentially, it's hit and miss. You really have to try it and see what you like. But there's a lot of people on Upwork, a lot of freelancers. Some of them are really good. Some of them you have to be careful about. But I find it beneficial from time to time to use. Guru is a similar platform. It's not as well known. Not as many freelancers are on it. Okay, let's get into some finance, and then that will wrap up our webinar and presentation. So these are tools that will work with finance. Gusto is a great tool for managing, essentially for human resource management. If you need to manage time off and people that you're working with, it works with your most accounting softwares, but it's a great tool to manage the team of people that you're working with. And I think different incentives, tracking time, a great way to manage your team from a HR perspective. Wave is sort of an accounting replacement. I'm assuming that most people will use something like QuickBooks or Xero. Wave is sort of a new age, or more focused on specifically on small business, but it manages payroll and all of those things that you would expect from an accounting system to use. YNAB is a very interesting tool. Most people associate it with personal finance, but it can be used to manage your business finance. What it does is it really creates different buckets and categories for you to manage your finances. YNAB stands for Yet Another Budget. But if you have budgeting challenges and you really are looking for a system that will help you manage your expenses better, I would suggest looking at YNAB. And then Simple is, if you're looking for a banking system that's different, and there is some learning curves with it, but Simple is strictly an online bank. And if you're, I would say that this probably works for smaller businesses as opposed to larger businesses, but you can essentially have a online banking system that manages and also helps you create different categories and buckets for the money that comes in. And I would suggest reading a book called Profit First. And this is a system, really an accounting system that, one of the challenges, and I've experienced this as well, is we get excited, we look at top line revenue. We get excited when we bring in a lot of money, and what happens automatically is in our mind, psychologically, we say, okay, we're bringing a lot of money. I need to hire more people. I need to invest in some more software. I need to invest in more computers. I need to rent office space. And all of a sudden, you take a look and you realize that your expenses have gone up dramatically. And even though you had a great month, all of a sudden, the next month, that month wasn't so great, and all of a sudden, you're spending more than you can afford. So Profit First really takes a very different approach to business accounting, and tells you and says the way to account for is really putting your profit, really focusing on being profitable. And the way to do that would be to focus on profits first, the name of the book, and pull your profit out of your revenue first, and then make sure that you have money left over to cover your expenses. And if you don't have enough money to cover your expenses, starting to cut those expenses. I suggest you read it, and I think you'll find it very, very helpful. And many people have have taken the Profit First method and used YNAB, that software, to make them go hand in hand and work together very nicely. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening to it. I hope I didn't speak too quickly. I just wanted to get through as much as possible. If you would like a copy of this presentation, I'd be happy to send it to you. Just send an email with the subject words apps, CHYE, in the subject line, and I'll set it up that you'll automatically get an email via Zapier a little bit later this afternoon. So feel free to send that email, and that's all I have. Thank you again. Sorry, if there's anybody that has any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. So the question is if I'm familiar with Apricot Social Solutions. I'm not sure if you're talking about the same thing, but Apricot is I believe a membership software where memberships of a whole bunch of different types of memberships will, people need to manage memberships will use their solution. And I have not used it myself, but it's pretty well known in terms of how they market their own product. They do a very good job in the nonprofit space and in the membership space. So I know it's a very well-known tool. I have not used it. I'm not familiar with Apricot in terms of word of mouth and how it relates to other tools in that space. Question is, does Monday.com customizable for beginners? So the answer is that Monday.com is 100% customizable, and that's what they pride themselves on, being super customizable. I don't know a lot of people that are in the small business world or solo that are using Monday. I think that it's a bit more of there's a learning curve when it comes to Monday. It's not your standard project management tool. So if you have the discipline to go through their documentation, they have a lot of presentations and guides, and you work with it and you onboard slowly, my guess is you'll find it very effective. But the way, what I've learned is, especially when I give these types of presentations, people have different ways to process tools and tasks and different ways they manage things. So what works for one person doesn't work for the other. And people get into heated arguments about different tools like this. But the bottom line is our brains work differently. So what works for one person, some people are so frustrated with all of these productivity apps, and they say just Google Sheets just works the best for me, and that's fine. But the problem is if you're working with other people, you have to make sure that you're finding a tool that there's a consensus that works well for everybody. So that's the answer about Monday.com. Next question is, what's the best app for reminders for deadlines? So I'm not sure what the question is in terms of deadlines. If you're looking at if you have projects that have deadlines, most of these productivity tools will have deadlines and will give you, reminders. ClickUp has due dates and will notify you when things are overdue, and will send you emails. My guess is that a lot of these tools, you can even set it up using Zapier, where if a task is marked as it becomes due, it could send you a text message saying it's overdue. But most of these productivity tools do a pretty good job of doing due dates. If you're looking just for deadlines, you can go with simpler tools like Todoist, or some of these smaller free tools as well. We'll give you a simple job of deadlines. Todoist has a business version called WeDoist, I believe, and we'll give you the deadlines as well. But they all work pretty well with deadlines. Question is there something similar to Monday.com but more user-friendly, similar to Google Docs but more customized? So if you're looking for a spreadsheet view with other views, but if you're looking for something that's similar to Google Sheets, I would look at Smartsheets. It's going to have there's a lot of familiarity to spreadsheets, but it has a lot more power than your standard Google Sheet. The accounting agency that I work with, that I outsource my accounting work to, they use Smartsheets, and it's very simple for me to look at the list of my expenses that they're asking me about and just quickly put in notes there. So I would look at that. It's not super similar to Monday.com. Monday.com I think is very different than Smartsheets. I think Monday.com is more unique than the other productivity tools. I would say ClickUp and Asana are pretty similar. Smartsheets is unique in its own way in that it's similar to a spreadsheet system, and Monday.com is different than all of them. Next question is, I'm currently using Google Sheets. What's easiest to switch to? I think Asana is going to be the easiest to switch to. I believe that it is free. They have a free version, so you can play around with it and get comfortable with it first. It also will depend on how many people you're working with. If you're working by yourself, there's a whole bunch of tools you can use that are pretty simple. I would probably look at WeDoist as well. And by the way, a lot of what I find, there's a lot of guides out there. You can do some of your own research relatively effectively. If you Google productivity guides for beginners, and you make sure that the guide is from 2019 or even 2018, you'll have a good amount of guides that will pretty much recommend the same apps. So if you're willing to spend a half an hour of research, you'll find a much bigger list than what I presented today.